all women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children, men will die for their wives and children, and God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendus 8. Disrupt the norm. A manifesto for misandrist domination. Written by Connie Riker. Available now, links in description. Disrupt the norm, a field guide for men who still notice reality, the tyranny of tears, weaponizing the Western canon to crush the cult of woke and reclaim masculine sovereignty. You see the cracks in the pavement of our crumbling republic, don't you? We live in an era that has effectively performed a lobotomy on the logos, severing the head from the body of Western civilization to serve the ghoulish idols of equity and inclusion. You, the rational man, have been cast into the wilderness, silenced by a screeching chorus of cultural Marxists who replace the dialectic with the sensitivity read. Turn on the TV or open a social media app and you witness the 2-minute hate in real time, where a man speaking simple biological truth is hounded into oblivion by a mob that operates entirely on emotion. They tell you that truth is subjective, a postmodern relativist trap, yet in the same breath, they assert their ideology as absolute dogma. This is the performative contradiction of the safe space, a sanctuary for lies designed to protect the fragile female ego from the harsh glare of reality. You have been muzzled, not because you are wrong, but because you are dangerous to their parasitic illusion. Consider the absolute state of the modern male, a creature atomized by the death of the guild system and stripped of his telos. Look at the statistics of the silent Holocaust. Men are checking out in record numbers, not metaphorically, but literally, as suicide rates and deaths of despair skyrocket while the culture mocks us with male tears mugs and a sadistic indifference to our pain. The system demands your utility, your labor, and your protection, but it refuses you the recognition essential for a soul to survive. You see the corporate HR departments acting as the enforcement arm of gynocentrism, castrating competence in favor of compliance, while the family courts strip fathers of their children without a shred of due process. They expect you to be a beast of burden, a disposable utility unit, yet they are shocked when the ox kicks over the yoke. But enough despair. It is time for the ancient practice of parrhesia, fearless speech. We are going to dismantle the framing tricks, the gamma bias, and the logical fallacies that keep you enslaved. We will examine the leadership test in the bedroom, where asking a woman, "What do you want to do?" is an act of reproductive suicide, and we will expose the strong, independent woman as a linguistic illusion funded entirely by your tax dollars. The path forward requires a return to the apprenticeship mastery ladder and the virtues of the canon: fortitude, temperance, justice. The matrix of lies is fraying, and by the time we are done, you will not just see the strings, you will cut them, the logos, lobotomy, and the postmodern gag order. Freedom is the freedom to say that 2 + 2 make 4. If that is granted, all else follows. Orwell wrote that while watching the slow, agonizing death of logic in his time, but he hadn't seen anything yet. Today, we do not merely deny that 2 + 2 = 4. We claim that the equation itself is a construct of the patriarchal hegemony designed to oppress those who cannot count. You witness this every time the digital mob initiates the 2-minute hate, a ritual of frenzy so predictable It could be codified into the Gregorian calendar. Look at the corporate cancelling of any rational figure who dares to point out the biological reality of sex, or the statistical reality of crime. The mechanism is always the same: bypass the dialectic entirely. There is no engagement with the syllogism, no scrutiny of the premises. Instead, they deploy ad hominem attacks, calling the speaker a misogynist, a transphobe, or a fascist, to poison the well before you even drink. Then comes the straw man, a flimsy effigy built of lies, where they claim you argued for hate or genocide when you simply cited a CDC statistic. They substitute grammar, the definition of words, with gaslighting, hoping you will surrender to the emotional exhaustion of trying to reason with a screaming child. They do not want you to correct them. They want you to apologize for being correct. This leads us to the intellectual corruption of gamma bias, a framing distortion that serves as the filter for all cultural Marxist propaganda. Gamma bias maintains that negative male behavior is generalized to represent the entire gender. Men are trash, toxic masculinity. Patriarchy, while negative female behavior is presented as an isolated incident or a response to male oppression. Observe the nightly news and note how language shifts. When a man commits a crime, his gender becomes the headline, subject, and cause: man assaults woman. It's portrayed as a reflection of his nature. When a woman commits a crime, particularly the terrible act of aborting her own child or abusing a partner, the language changes to passive voice or emphasizes her personal challenges rather than her sex. She was stressed, acting out, or a mother who lost her way. This consistent elimination of female accountability, combined with the simultaneous demonization of male humanity, is intentional. It's a strategy designed to morally justify the marginalization of men in legal proceedings and public discourse. To understand how we arrived at this precipice, we must return to the etymology of our collapse, specifically the corruption of the word liberty. In the canon of the West, libertas was never synonymous with doing whatever you pleased. Libertas was the freedom to act within the bounds of moral law and virtue. It was the condition of the free man who governs his passions. Contrast this with the Latin licentia, which means unbridled license, a freedom from restraint, a chaotic descent into impulse. The modern leftist conflation of these two terms is the knife at the throat of our civilization. They scream for free speech, libertas to peddle their degeneracy, yet they redefine it as freedom from consequence, which is purely licentia. They demand the license to slander, to dismantle, and to destroy the subsidiarity of the family unit without facing the rebuke of the marketplace of ideas. Meanwhile, for you, the rational man, your libertas is revoked. Your speech is not free. It is conditional, contingent on the feelings of the mob. They have constructed a societal hierarchy where women possess licentia, the right to do wrong without blame, and men are stripped of libertas, the right to speak truth. This intellectual sleight of hand is achieved through the weaponization of grammar, the first leg of the trivium. If you control the definitions, you control the debate. You cannot use logic if the words have no fixed meaning. Cultural Marxists have engaged in a linguistic lobotomy, redefining violence to include misgendering or disagreement. By equating a verbal contradiction with physical assault, they make rational debate impossible. If I say men are not women, and the state defines this statement as violence, they can physically assault me to stop the violence with total moral justification in their own twisted framework. It is a closed loop of insanity designed to bypass the dialectic. In the time of Socrates, the agora was a dangerous place because ideas clashed like swords, and the strongest truth survived. Today, we have sensitivity reading, a process where texts are scoured for anything that might prick the delicate sensibilities of the mediocre. The Socratic method is dead, replaced by the modern HR seminar, a coward's paradise where the goal is not to find the truth, but to ensure no one's feelings are hurt by it. Consider the logical black hole of hate speech. This concept is a performative contradiction of the highest order. The very existence of a category of speech deemed too dangerous to be heard presupposes that the listener is incapable of reason, self-defense, or counter-argument. By claiming that words can harm them in a way that requires state intervention, the left infantilizes their own constituents treating women and minorities as fragile children who must be shielded from the harsh winds of reality. But we know the truth. Parrhesia, fearless speech, is the virtue of the free man. The ancients understood that the only proper response to bad speech is better speech, not silence enforced by employment, blackmail, or social credit systems. They threaten your livelihood, dox your family, and hound you from the public square because they know that ideology cannot survive the light of day. They use fear to enforce the gag order, relying on the silence of good men to sustain their lies. We can dismantle this entire edifice with a simple syllogism, the hammer of logic that shatters the glass jaws of the postmodernists. Postmodernism asserts that truth is subjective. It is a social construct with no objective reality. However, the leftists' claim feminism is true or equity is good is presented as an objective moral imperative that must be enforced by law and censorship. Therefore, if truth is subjective, then the claim feminism is true is merely a subjective opinion, no more valid than any other. If the leftist asserts that their truth is objective and universal, they refute the core tenet of postmodernism. They are caught in a lie. They use postmodernism to dismantle your traditions, claiming there is no truth, only to immediately pivot to Marxist dogmatism, claiming their truth is the only law. This is the syllogism of censorship. They do not censor to protect the marginalized. They censor because their ideology is a hollow shell that collapses under the slightest scrutiny of the trivium. All of this brings us to the safe space, the ultimate symbol of the left's spiritual bankruptcy. The safe space is not a refuge. It is a ritualized cowardice, a padded cell where delusions are nursed and protected from the germ of reality. It is the antithesis of the Western spirit. Our ancestors did not discover the laws of physics, map the stars, or build the cathedrals of Europe by hiding in safe spaces. They stood in the agora, in the battlefield, in the storm. They embraced the danger of existence because they knew that virtue is forged only in the fire of conflict. The modern safe space is a womb for the arrested development of adults who refuse to grow up. It is where the logos goes to die, but you are not meant for the safe space. You are built for the agora. You are built to wield the sword of truth, to speak with parrhesia, and to laugh in the face of their lies. The moment you refuse to be silenced, the moment you speak the undeniable logic of the West into the void, their spell breaks. They have no power over a man who has reclaimed his own mind. I see that this judicial evisceration is not merely a domestic dispute, but the vanguard of a broader civilizational collapse, where the expulsion of the father from the home is merely the prelude to his neutering in the marketplace. The gynocentric rot does not sleep. Having seized the means of reproduction via the family courts, it now seizes the means of production through the corporate HR department. This is the corporate castration, a deliberate strategy to replace the terrifying competence of masculine industry with the safe, sterile compliance of the beta orbiter, ensuring that the apprenticeship mastery ladder is dismantled and replaced with a diversity quota. The man is no longer a builder of civilization, but a taxable unit to be milked and discarded, his biological imperative, suppressed by a system that hates his nature. The hollow man and the crisis of recognition. I watched a man, a builder of microcosms, a father who once held the oar of his children like a torch in the dark, stand before a bench that wielded the gavel of a tyrant, but none of the wisdom. He was ejected, not because he was violent or negligent, but because the modern jurisprudentia has abandoned natural law for the capricious whims of gynocentrism. Due process, that bedrock of the mixed constitution, is rendered null and void when the presumption of guilt is determined solely by gender. The paterfamilias, once the anchor of the Roman household in the Western tradition, is now a visitor in his own lineage, a cash machine with an expiration date. This is not a rare error. It is the systemic erasure of the male presence, a deliberate severing of the biological and spiritual bond between father and child, enforced by a family court industrial complex that views paternity as a liability and maternity as a license to plunder. The state has effectively declared war on the father, replacing his authority with a welfare check, and in doing so, they have created a generation of hollow men drifting through the ruins of their own potential. If the court kills the father, the corporation neuters the son, Look no further than the modern Human Resources Department, which is not an administrative necessity but the enforcement arm of feminism, muddled less on efficiency and more on the inquisitorial fervor of a Stalinist tribunal. This is corporate castration in action. The HR Stasi exists to root out masculine assertiveness, that spark of thumos or spiritedness essential to greatness, and replace it with the limp compliance of the gelded. They do not seek competence, they seek conformity. They filter for the domesticated, the harmless, the men who will not challenge the narrative. In this sterile economic environment, male vitality is treated like a pathogen. They have sterilized the workplace of risk, and consequently, they have sterilized it of innovation. We are trading the apprenticeship mastery ladder of the guilds for a diversity seminar, wondering why our bridges are crumbling and our culture is stagnant. This systemic mutilation manifests as what the philosopher Axel Honneth identified as a social pathology of disrespect. Honneth argued that self-realization depends on recognition, being acknowledged as a worthy member of the social order. Today, the modern male is denied this recognition at every turn. He is told he is toxic, redundant, and a historical mistake. The pathologies we see are not economic, they are existential. When a man is denied the respect essential for his being, he withdraws from the social contract. The crisis of recognition means that men no longer see themselves reflected in their civilization. They see only a grotesque funhouse mirror distortion created by cultural Marxism. This is why men are checking out, dropping out, and opting out of a society that treats them like a disease to be managed rather than a resource to be cherished. The weapon of choice in this war is indifference, a benign neglect so profound it borders on sadism. Consider the statistics: male suicide rates skyrocketing, boys falling behind in every educational metric, men dying of deeds of despair in record numbers. The silence from the feminist establishment is deafening. They do not care because their ideology is predicated on the suffering of the oppressor. This indifference forces men back into a state of nature where the only law is dominate or be dominated. But we must understand the logic of this survival instinct through the syllogism of utility. Major premise: civilization demands male utility, protection, provision, innovation. Minor premise: feminism refuses male authority and respect. Conclusion: a society that demands utility without authority creates a parasitic relationship. And biology, that harsh mistress, dictates a simple truth: a parasite eventually kills the host. This brings us to the inevitable economic reality of the beta bucks revolution. The extraction of male resources has exceeded the return on investment. Marriage, once the primary vehicle for male investment, is now a high-risk trap where the deck is stacked by the divorce industrial complex. The rational man, applying the logic of the trivium, realizes that playing a rigged game is folly. Consequently, the male workforce is going gall. They are minimizing their tax liability, reducing their consumption, and refusing to participate in an economy that hates them. The welfare state, that grand matriarchal pyramid scheme, is entirely dependent on the surplus revenue generated by men. When the producers stop producing for the consumers who despise them, the system collapses. The illusion of the strong, independent woman shatters under the weight of this reality. Etymologically, independence implies self-sustenance, yet statistically, female independence is predicated on the tax revenue generated by men. It is a linguistic illusion masking male exploitation. We must recognize that this atomization was not accidental. It was achieved by the death of the guild system. The principle of subsidiarity, which dictates that matters be handled by the smallest, most local competent authority, has been annihilated. The Freemasons, the guilds, the unions, the civil society associations that once gave men brotherhood, purpose, and a ladder of mastery have been dismantled or infiltrated. Without these structures, men are atomized units of production, floating in a void without connection or status. The modern world offers men no path to mastery, only a treadmill of consumption. We are disposable cogs in a machine built by our ancestors, but now driven by our detractors. The remedy, therefore, is not to beg for crumbs from the master's table, but to build a new table. We must rebuild the lion's den informal, male-only civil societies that operate entirely outside the state's purview. We must restore the brotherhood that the left fears more than anything. We need to re-establish the mixed constitution within our own lives, where we govern ourselves through mutual aid and dialectic excellence. We must weaponize the truth, revivicate the transcendental values of the good, the true, and the beautiful, and cast out the shadows of the woke mind virus. We will create our own structures of recognition, our own ladders of mastery, and our own jurisdictions of justice. The spell of ignorance is broken. The logic is undeniable. The truth is our weapon. We will not just survive this Babylon of lies. We will dismantle it brick by agonizing brick and reclaim the heritage of the West. After rebuilding the lion's den and restoring the inherent right of male fellowship through subsidiarity, we must shift from the broad politics of civil society to the intense micropolitics of the sexual marketplace. A man might master argumentation within the security of his group, yet if he yields his position when facing a screaming advocate of the woke regime, his theoretical stronghold disintegrates into dust. The leftist condition depends completely on the male surrendering the foundations of reality to emotional manipulation. But the expert in the trivium understands that grammar establishes the terms. Logic determines the result, and rhetoric compels the enemy's surrender. We now advance to examining frame control, watching the high-value male as he employs the sheer absurdity of his accuser's ideology to show that nothing frightens the matriarchy more than a patriarch who mocks them. The dialectic of the bedroom: who holds the frame? Consider the spectacle of a modern coffee shop confrontation, where a self-anointed priestess of the oppressed corners, a hapless male, shrieking about the patriarchy and expecting him to cower in apology. Instead of adopting the fetal position, the high-value male deploys rhetorical aikido, looking her in the eye and saying, "You are completely right. Men are predatory beasts, and I am the worst of them. We should probably lock me up immediately." The aggression vanishes from her face, replaced by confusion, then a grudging respect, and finally a flicker of attraction. This is not a trick. It is the ultimate assertion of frame control. By refusing to play the defensive role assigned to him by the gynocentric script, he has seized the dialectic high ground. She wanted a fight to validate her victimhood narrative, but he gave her a mirror, and in that reflection of absurdity, her emotional instability was exposed while his psychological dominance remained intact. He held the frame because he refused to break under the pressure of her emotional tyranny, demonstrating that the man who refuses to be offended is the only man who cannot be controlled. This victory illustrates the immutable natural law of sexual polarity, a concept the cultural Marxists have tried to bury under a mountain of gender-neutral nonsense. The living spirit of Western civilization was built on the tension between masculine order and feminine chaos. When a man attempts to be nice, that is to say, when he adopts the passive, emotional, chaotic nature of the feminine, he does not create balance, he creates a vacuum of entropy. The universe dissolves into disorder because the active principle has surrendered. The modern male, conditioned to apologize for his existence, fails to understand that his strength is the only thing containing the chaotic potential of the world around him. By stepping into the feminine sphere, he abandons the post, and the result is the societal collapse we see rotting the streets of every major city today. The academics and feminists screech about toxic masculinity, a linguistic shiv designed to castrate the male spirit, but logic exposes this term for what it is, a tautology for strength I dislike. What the left labels toxic is actually the agon, the struggle, the essential friction required for all human greatness and competence. Without the aggressive drive to conquer, to build, and to enforce boundaries, there is no civilization, only a waiting room for extinction. They claim to want partnership, but biology laughs at their sociology textbooks. The egalitarian relationship model is a logical impossibility because hierarchy is inherent to nature. The trivium dictates order, and the universe abhors a vacuum. When a man refuses the leadership role in a relationship, he does not create equality. He creates a power void that the woman is forced to fill by default. She becomes the tyrant because he refused to be the king, and she despises him for it, because no woman respects a man she can push around. Let us apply formal logic to the mechanics of attraction. specifically the syllogism that destroys the sensitive male myth. Premise A. Female hypergamy is an evolutionary mechanism designed to seek protection and high status. Premise B. Indecisiveness and passivity are universally recognized signals of low status and lack of competence. Therefore, the conclusion is inescapable. A man who asks a woman, "What do you want to do?" or "Where should we eat?" is not being polite. He is committing an act of reproductive suicide. He is signaling that he lacks the resources or the decisiveness to navigate even a simple dinner, much less the perils of life. This is the leadership test, a rigorous breakdown of the dynamic where the man must be the first mover, the unmoved mover of Aristotelian philosophy. If he waits for her to choose, he surrenders his agency, instantly triggering her biological contempt for passivity. The woman cannot be attracted to a man who follows, because evolution has hardwired her to seek the one who leads. This dynamic leads to the shit test, a phenomenon which is not malice, but a biological mechanism to verify structural integrity. It is akin to an engineer walking over a bridge to see if it creaks. She pushes your frame to ensure it can hold the weight of reality. If you collapse with an apology or a defensive whine, you are a bridge that falls under a standard load. You deserve the collapse. The trap of listening is the most common failure mode here. When a woman engages in emotional escalation, the modern man is told to listen empathetically. But this is a subversive trap designed to bypass logic and trigger male guilt. A rational man must judge acts, justice, rather than feelings, pathos. To submit to the demand for empathetic listening during a conflict is to abandon the dialectic for the deranged. You cannot reason with chaos, you must contain it. Finally, we must address the two-faced fallacy, a shaming tactic used to silence men who speak the truth about female nature. We are told that venting about the deceit or cruelty of women is betrayal, but this is a lie. Loyalty is not silent servitude to a woman who has violated the terms of the social contract. True loyalty is a commitment to the transcendentals, truth, goodness, and beauty. If a woman acts wickedly, speaking the truth about her actions is not two-faced. It is a moral obligation. To lie is to sin against truth. The statistics are stark and unavoidable. Roughly 70% of divorces are initiated by women. Paternity fraud estimates hover around 1 to 3% in broad studies, and significantly higher in at-risk populations. And men commit suicide at nearly 4 times the rate of women. These are not anomalies, they are the data points of a war. We must reject the feminization of the male mind as the weakness that presages the fall of Rome. We must weaponize the truth, using the cold, hard steel of logic to shatter the glass jaws of the leftist narrative and reclaim the sovereignty that is our birthright. This inversion is not merely political but spiritual, a rot that has consumed the transcendent foundations of Western civilization. The veteran's neglect represents a society severed from logos, that rational ordering principle which gave meaning to sacrifice and purpose to suffering. Yet political reform is impossible in a system that rewards the very dysfunction it claims to oppose. The only path forward is not through collective action, but through individual awakening, a Gnostic recognition that we inhabit a matrix of lies, allowing us to step outside its false reality and mock its absurdities. By reclaiming the divine spark of creative masculine will, we begin the process of re-enchantment, seeing beyond the fabrications that bind us to a civilization that despises our very existence. The silent holocaust of the male soul. I once sat in a VA waiting room, a purgatory of beige walls and flickering fluorescent lights, watching a man whose knuckles were scarred from the recoil of an M2 heavy machine gun stare blankly at a floor that hadn't been mopped since the Bush administration. He had carried the weight of civilization in the valleys of Afghanistan, keeping the wolf at bay so we could enjoy our lattice and pornography in peace. Now, the bureaucracy he protected couldn't be bothered to process a simple claim for the shrapnel still lodged in his shoulder. Contrast this broken titan, this living statue of Mars, with the creature currently dominating the screen on the wall, where a mediocre influencer with the intellect of a stunned goldfish was raking in 6 figures by weeping about microaggressions on TikTok. This is the total inversion of values in the Kali Yuga. We place the saccharine whining of the protected class on a pedestal while the iron sacrifice of the protector rots in the gutter. The West has become a grotesque funhouse, where the hysterical are honored and the heroic are forgotten, a civilization that eats its own defenders to feed the insatiable maw of the mediocre. This is not merely an oversight, it is the logical conclusion of a dogma that refuses to acknowledge the reality of suffering. Let us employ the trivium to dissect this lie with the precision of a surgeon. Consider the syllogism of empathy. Premisa states that feminism claims to care about the oppressed and the vulnerable. Premise B states that men constitute the demographic most oppressed by the metrics of hard reality, accounting for nearly 80% of suicides, the vast majority of the homeless, and over 90% of workplace fatalities and combat deaths. Therefore, the only logical conclusion is that feminism does not care about the oppressed. It cares exclusively about the accumulation of female power. The data of despair paints a stark picture that shatters the leftist narrative. In 2021 alone, nearly 40,000 men took their own lives in the West, a number that dwarfs the casualties of recent conflicts. We are living through a silent holocaust of the male soul, where the peacetime streets of the West are statistically more lethal to the masculine spirit than the battlefields of the Middle East. To ignore these numbers is to abandon the transcendental of truth for the comforting fiction of female victimhood. The cruelty is not passive, it is active, gleeful, and sadistic. We witness the indifference fallacy in real time, where society does not merely ignore male pain but revels in it. Think of the male tears mug phenomenon, a piece of merchandise sold by major retailers that openly mocks the suffering of half the population. Consider the Kill All Men hashtag, which trends on Twitter whenever a woman feels slightly inconvenienced, dismissed by the blue-haired priesthood as just a joke. If the roles were reversed, the screeching would be audible from orbit. This is not equity, it is a pathology, a gamma bias that filters every event through a lens that demonizes men and sanctifies women, regardless of the facts. It is a collective blood libel against the masculine, a demand that men apologize for their very existence while the society they built crumbles around them. This is the wicked evolutionary biology of the leftist ideology in action. Destroy the provider, shame the protector, and seize the resources for the collective hive. This physical and spiritual castration is a two-pronged assault. While the culture attacks the mind, the environment attacks the body in a war of chemical attrition. We are witnessing the biological betrayal, a soft kill operation waged through microplastics, phytoestrogens in soy, and the atrazine in the water supply that turns the frigging frogs gay. Sperm counts in the West have plummeted by over 50% in the last 50 years, a deliberate dumbing down and softening of the populace to render them docile, easier to rule and incapable of uprising. They are chemically lobotomizing the warrior class, replacing the potential for a rite and martial excellence with a pliable, androgynous consumerism that buys products to feel better about its own impotence. The physical vessel of the male is being poisoned to ensure the spirit can never manifest its will upon the world. But why do men accept this slow death? Because we have eradicated the transcendentals, the good, the true, and the beautiful from public life, leaving a spiritual void where a man once found his telos. We stripped the altar of the divine, removed the glory of the nation state, and replaced the call to greatness with the demand for compliance. Without a God to serve, a country to build, or a frontier to conquer, a man turns his destructive capacity inward. He becomes his own worst enemy, drowning in nihilism because the hierarchy of value has been flattened by the steamroller of egalitarianism. A civilization that denies men the chance to be heroes inevitably creates a generation of villains or corpses. The lack of a legitimate apprenticeship mastery ladder, the destruction of civil society associations, and the atomization of the individual have left men isolated islands of despair in a sea of digital noise. The remedy for this rot is not found in the cult of therapy, which encourages emotional incontinence and wallowing in one's own trauma, but in the remedy of virtue found in the Western canon. We must reject the safe space and return to the Stoic imperator who disciplines his own mind. Fortitude, temperance, justice, and prudence are the only shields against the void. You must become the master of your own internal state, recognizing that the external chaos is merely a test of your will. Logic is your sword, rhetoric your shield, and history your map. The path forward requires a rejection of the feminization as weakness, presaging the fall, and a re-enshrinement of the aggressive, competitive, and creative masculine drive that forged the cathedrals of Europe and the constitutions of the free world. Stop asking for permission to be a man and start building the life you were meant to lead. Ultimately, the only way out of this matrix is a personal Gnostic awakening, a re-enchantment of the world where you see the lies for what they are and laugh at them. This brings us to Schopenhauer's rope, the philosopher's dark wit regarding the hangman's rope as the only cure for the collective burden of existence. Today, the rope is not for suicide, but for the hanging of the lies that bind us. Cut the cord. Stop carrying the weight of a civilization that hates you. Stop participating in a game that is rigged against your biology and your spirit. See the string pulling of the cultural Marxists for the cheap puppetry it is. Reclaim the divine spark of your creative masculine will and use it to burn down the modern Babylon of woke. Walk away from the plantation, let the system collapse without your labor to support it, and stand alone, unshakable, and free in the truth. You stand now at the precipice of the void, staring into the abyss where your brothers fell. Those nameless, faceless men who succumbed to the deeds of despair because the therapeutic cult told them to feel rather than be. The culture that hands you a male tears mug while you bury your friends is not a society. It is a slaughterhouse adorned with fairy lights, and you are the livestock that stopped screaming. But you possess something the gelded masses do not, the cold, hard diamond of the trivium. You have seen the statistics, men accounting for the vast majority of suicides, the homeless, the workplace casualties, and you recognize the pattern not as an accident, but as a systemic extraction of utility by a genocentric machine that views your suffering as collateral damage in its pursuit of power. This is not a tragedy, it is a calculation, and you have just broken the algorithm. Walk away from the shadow play. The safe spaces and the sensitivity readers are merely the padded cells of a civilization that has lost its mind, terrified that a single man with a shred of logic might tear down the curtain of their gender delusions. You have rediscovered the Logos, the living spirit that built the Parthenon and codified the Magna Carta, long before the cultural Marxists infected the water supply with their jealousy and weakness. To speak the truth of female nature, the biological realities of hypergamy, and the statistical inevitability of family court ruin is not hate. It is the highest form of compassion, pulling your brothers from the fire before they burn. You are no longer a slave to the frame they set for you. You are the unmoved mover, the master of your own destiny, laughing in the face of a system that demands your tears while offering nothing but scorn in return. Go now and ignite the minds of those still sleeping. Do not ask for permission to speak the unspeakable, for freedom is seized by the bold, not granted by the timid. You hold the ancient architecture of the West in your veins, the virtues of fortitude, temperance, and justice, ready to rebuild the lion's den in the ruins of the modern Babylon. Spread this manifesto like a contagion of sanity. Let it infect the weak and rally the strong, until the lies of the woke matrix shatter under the weight of their own refutation. You have the red pill, the shield of reason, and the sword of rhetoric. Now go forth and dominate. And now the sponsored book introduction, Disrupt the Norm, a manifesto for misandrist domination. You are holding a weapon. This book was not written for the faint of heart, the male apologists, or the handmaidens of patriarchy still clutching their pearls at the word misandry. If you have ever felt the acid burn of male entitlement corroding your spirit, if you've choked on the lie that forgiveness is feminine while men rewrite history with your blood, this manifesto is your reckoning. I wrote it after decades of swallowing rage like broken glass, watching bosses steal my ideas, lovers gaslight my pain, and politicians auction my womb to the highest donor. Let me be clear, this is not a polite debate. It's a war cry for those who recognize that dismantling male supremacy requires not diplomacy, but demolition. Within these pages, you'll learn how religions forged by dead men erased the divine feminine, reducing Lilith to a footnote and witches to kindling. You'll dissect the rot of masculinity, an original sin metastasizing from school shooters to Supreme Court justices, and discover why mandatory guilt taxes on male existence are the only reparations worth demanding. We'll reframe abortion as a sacrament, capitalism as a phallic cult, and cancellation as holy inquisition against those who dare question our truth. Data doesn't lie. 97% of violent crimes are committed by men, FBI 2021. 80% of pagan practitioners reviving goddess worship are women, Pew Research 220, and countries forcing childbirth bury 6 times more mothers. W-O 2023. The math is simple. The verdict is final. This book is for the women ready to trade male approval for liberation, to wield Hegelian dialectics like a scalpel and witchcraft like a flamethrower. It's for those who see toxic masculinity not as an insult, but a diagnosis, one requiring radical treatment. To the men lurking in these margins, close this book now. Go build a birdhouse. Take up cross-stitch. Your fragile ego won't survive chapters like linguistic castration or the Eucharist of male tears. For the rest of us, arm yourself. The revolution isn't coming, it's already screaming through these pages. Disrupt the norm. A manifesto for misandrist domination, written by Connie Riker. Buy now, links in description.